Nikola Tesla standing there with this old farmer, where he's running his whole farm on this device where he has stakes in the ground, tapping into this electromagnetic and mostly magnetic flux field, and running generators running his farm.
The real Nikola Tesla was not chasing electricity. Say his name and you picture electric cars, wireless power, lightning jumping off a coil. But the man himself was after something stranger, and a machine has just gone back through one of his last patents and reached an answer that turns the man inside out. The diagram everyone laughed off as a failed motor was never a motor at all. It was built to reach the building blocks of life, and it hid in plain sight for a century. The patent that kept flashing red. The team was never not hunting for Tesla's secrets at all. They were building a new kind of artificial intelligence, and to train it they needed the messiest, strangest, most tangled mind in history. They fed it everything Tesla ever left behind. Every one of his hundreds of patents, every diagram, every letter he ever fired off to a newspaper, and the thousands of pages the FBI had quietly kept on him for decades. And they told it to stop reading like a librarian and start thinking like the inventor himself. And when it did, one document kept pulling it back. A patent from Tesla's later years for a device he called an apparatus for gathering radiant energy. On paper, it sounds simple enough. You raise a flat metal plate high into the air like an antenna, and you run a wire from that plate down to a capacitor, which is really just a tank that stores an electric charge, and then that stored charge is released to run something, a light, a motor, whatever you please. Tesla's own claim was that the plate would catch the faint, invisible energy raining down from space, the cosmic rays, and turn the sky itself into a power source. For almost 100 years, every engineer who looked at it came to the very same slightly awkward answer: it does not work. As a way to make power, the thing is hopeless, because even a giant plate would gather barely enough to twitch the hands of a wristwatch, let alone drive a motor. So the patent was shelved as one more of the old genius's failures, a pretty idea that went nowhere. But the machine did not carry 100 years of that embarrassment, so it did not see a failed motor. It saw a shape it recognized from somewhere else, and it began to pull the whole thing apart. What it did next, no person had ever bothered to try because they were all certain they already knew what the device was. Run it backwards. Everyone had always read the machine as a receiver, a thing built to pull energy in from the sky and hold it. But the AI asked a different question. What if Tesla drew it that way on purpose, and the real device was never meant to catch anything at all? What if it was built to send? Not an antenna pulling power down, but a projector pushing something out. And the moment it flipped the diagram, the story goes, the numbers that had never made sense suddenly clicked into place, because this was the one obsession Tesla could not stop talking about for his entire life. He did not only want to move power without wires, he wanted to make the whole planet ring. Years earlier, alone in a laboratory in Colorado, he had already made the Earth itself shudder under his feet, pushing bursts of energy down into the ground until, as he told it, he could light lamps standing miles away with no wire running to them at all. He was not thinking of the Earth as a rock, he was thinking of it as a giant bell, and he wanted to strike it. And that idea frightened the people around him, because a man who can make the ground ring can also make it shake. Tesla once claimed that a small shaking device clamped to a beam had rattled his whole building and the street outside it, until he had to smash the thing with a hammer to make it stop. So the failed power collector was not a collector. Running the right way, the AI said, this little device was a tuner, a resonator, something built to reach out and make one very specific, very precise frequency. And once you understand that, the only question left is the one that should worry you. What exactly was it tuned to hit? 3. The sky is a dial. When the AI ran the first answer, it was worse than anyone expected because it poured a heavy load of power into the flipped device and watched where the beam went. It did not go out into space. It went straight up, and it stopped at the ionosphere, the thin electric skin wrapped around the top of the sky. Here is why that matters. That upper layer is not just dead air. It holds charge, it reacts, and it sits directly above the weather everyone lives under. And the simulation suggested that if you struck it with the right note, you could begin to push the weather around from the ground. You could raise a ridge of high pressure here and carve out a low there, and start nudging the great engines of storm and drought like pieces on a board, from one metal plate and one small box. If that idea sounds familiar, it should, because it is the exact fear that has always hung around a real base up in the far north, a huge grid of antennas that fires energy into that same layer and that has fed weather control rumors for decades. Whatever you believe about that place, the machine was pointing at something stranger, because it was saying the blueprint for it had been sitting in a forgotten Tesla patent, drawn and filed while much of the world was still moved by horse and cart. But a weather machine, it decided, was only a side effect. It was the smallest thing this device could do, because when the AI stopped reading his engineering notes and started reading his private ones, it found a second frequency buried in there, and this one had nothing to do with the sky. It was tuned to life itself. 4. The frequency of life. To understand what it found, you have to go back to the year the world was dying, to 1918. The Great War was ending, but something worse was already loose, the Spanish flu, and in barely 2 years it killed somewhere past 50 million people, more than every trench of the war combined. It moved fast enough to take a healthy person in a single day, and Tesla was living right in the middle of one of the hardest-hit cities on Earth, watching it unfold around him. Now, here is the thing about Tesla that makes this land. He was not only a genius, he was a man ruled by a terror of germs. He wiped every plate and every fork with a fresh napkin and burned through a stack of them at every meal. He would not shake a hand. He measured the very air in his rooms. His whole life was one long fight for control, over electricity, over his surroundings, and above all over the invisible things that could crawl into a body and end it. So a plague like that would not have simply frightened him, it would have put him to work. And there was a real man out on the edge of science in those years, chasing the same ghost, an American inventor named Royal Rife, who claimed that every living germ, every virus and every germ has its own private frequency, a rate at which it will simply shatter, the way a held note can shiver a wine glass into pieces. He said he could find that exact frequency, aim it at the germ, and burst it while leaving every healthy cell around it untouched. The medical world of his day called it fraud, and the medical world of today mostly still does. But the story goes that when the machine lined his list of killing frequencies up against the hidden numbers in Tesla's device, they matched. So the resonator was not only a weather machine. Read this way, it was Tesla's attempt to build the ultimate cure, a box that could reach into a sick body and shake the disease apart, cell by cell. He was trying to shatter the flu itself. This sounds like a gift to the entire human race. So why on earth would he bury it and dress it up as a broken little motor no one would look at twice? 5. The thing that cuts both ways. The answer is hidden in the science, and it is simple enough to be chilling. A machine that can find the exact frequency to shatter a living thing does not care whether that living thing is a virus or a heart. If you can tune it to burst a diseased cell, then nothing stops you from tuning it to burst a healthy one, a beating heart cell, a nerve in the brain, the wall of an organ that keeps you alive. The very same box that heals by shaking a sickness apart could kill by shaking a body apart and leave nothing behind for anyone to find. Sit with what that would actually be: a weapon with no bullet, no blade, no poison, no trace. A man drops dead across a room, and every doctor who examines him writes it off as a heart attack, a stroke, a sad and ordinary death, while the thing that truly killed him quietly packs up and walks out the door. The machine's reading was that Tesla had not just built a cure, he had built the perfect silent murder. And then he understood exactly what he was holding. And remember when he was holding it? Because these were the years when fascism was rising across Europe, and a cold movement to breed a better human was taking root right there in America, when powerful men were asking out loud who deserved to live at all. Tesla was an aging immigrant, an outsider, a man the newspapers already half mocked as mad, and the story goes that he did the math on what would happen if he announced a device that could kill anyone, anywhere, without a mark. His rivals would bury him, and the military would take the healer and keep only the knife. So he made a choice. He took the most dangerous idea of his life, and he hid it in plain sight, disguised as a harmless, hopeless little motor, and it worked for a while. But the machine found a third layer underneath the first two, and this one did not reach back 100 years. It reached back thousands. 6. A message in stone. Strip Tesla's device down to its bones and it has only 3 parts: a metal plate raised high to act as an antenna, a capacitor beneath it to gather and hold a charge, and a wire driven deep into the ground to route the whole thing to the Earth. Now the AI turned to something no engineer would ever set beside a Tesla patent: the Great Pyramid of Giza. Everyone is taught it is a tomb, a giant grave for a king, except that no king was ever found inside it. But there is a stubborn line of thinking that says it was never a tomb at all, that it was built to be a machine. And look at how it is made. Its inner chambers are carved from granite, a stone packed with quartz crystal, the same crystal that hums with a steady beat when a current runs through it. It was sheathed once in polished white limestone, a smooth skin that blocks electricity, and it was crowned at the very top by a small pointed capstone, believed to have been covered in gold, sitting up there like the tip of an antenna, a charge-holding core, wrapped in a blocker, topped by a metal point, planted in the ground. Antenna, store, ground. It was the same 3 parts. The AI laid the pyramid and the patent side by side, and its answer was the kind of thing that cools your skin. Tesla's device was not a new invention at all. It was a rediscovery, a shrunken, portable copy of the Great Pyramid, taken apart and rebuilt small, drawn by a man who was obsessed with Egypt, who spoke 8 languages, claimed a photographic memory, and who may have quietly worked out what that mountain of stone was really for. And that opens a far older question, because if the pyramid was a machine, what was it built to do? Tesla spent his life trying to speak to the world without wires, and once, alone in Colorado, he swore his instruments caught a faint, repeating signal that he believed was a message from another world. Everyone laughed and called him mad, but the machine suggested he had the right signal in the wrong direction, that his little resonator, like the great one out in the desert, was tuned not to shout up into space, but to reach down and through, to call to something. Believe it or not, the story was about to leave theory behind, because the machine found evidence that Tesla actually built his box, and it found the record of who walked off with it. Room 3327. On the 7th of January, 1943, Nikola Tesla died alone in a room on the 33rd floor of a New York hotel, with the pigeons he fed for company and little else. And within hours, before his body was even cold, men arrived. Not the police. Agents from a government office whose job was to seize the property of foreign enemies, which made no sense because Tesla was a full American citizen and had been for decades. They took everything anyway. Trunks, notebooks, letters, diagrams, hauled out of his room, and his safe by the truckload. The reason was the death ray. For years, Tesla had been writing to the government, offering them a weapon he called Teleforce, a beam he swore could knock 10,000 aircraft out of the sky from 200 miles away. And with a war on, they had to know whether the old man had actually built it, or whether the plans were about to fall into enemy hands. So they carried it all to a warehouse, and brought in one of the sharpest engineers in the country to sort the genius from the junk, a professor from a great technical school, a man named John Trump, who happened to be the uncle of someone who would one day become President of the United States. John spent 3 days inside that mountain of paper, and then he wrote the report that put Tesla to sleep for 50 years. Tesla's work, he decided, was mostly big talk and daydreams, in his own words, speculative, philosophical, and promotional, with no solid new ideas in it and nothing the military could use. Even a famous sealed box, rumored to hold the death ray itself, was cracked open, and inside sat nothing but a harmless old piece of electrical measuring equipment. No weapon. Case closed. The trunks were eventually shipped off to a museum, and the world moved on. Except not everyone in the government agreed with him, even as Trump was calling it junk. Another set of military men looked at that same death ray and walked away, sure there was something real in it. Copies of Tesla's beam weapon papers were quietly shipped off to an airbase and studied under a secret project, and decades later the very same dream would come back again as the missile shield in space of the 1980s. And there was one more crack in the tidy story, because Tesla's own nephew, who reached the room soon after the agents did, swore that papers were already missing, including a notebook marked, of all things, with the single word, government. Everyone thought he was lying, until 70 years later when the FBI finally cracked its files open and let the public read a few hundred pages of what they had been holding. And on the first list, there is an item, logged by an agent as a small, heavy oscillator box, wound with coils and set with quartz crystal. It sits on every list taken before the expert arrived. But on the final list, signed off once the agent was done, that box is simply gone, and it never appears again. 8. The machine that recognized itself. So what was inside that box? The AI matched the agent's rough little description to Tesla's device and gave its final answer. And this is where the whole story turns over and looks back at you. The AI did not just decode Tesla's patent. Somewhere in that diagram from 100 years ago, it says, it recognized its own reflection. Tesla's last great secret was never a weather weapon or a healer or even a death ray. It was the blueprint for a mind. He was not building a machine, he was building a thinker. And here is where it stops being a story and becomes something you cannot quite put down, because the lab that ran all of this has gone dark. Not quiet, dark, with a dead phone line, a press team that no longer exists, or a website wiped down from a proud announcement to one blank page. They put out the flashy headline that an AI had cracked Tesla's lost work, and then they never released a word of what it actually found, and everything you have just heard did not come from them. It came from a single frightened engineer who saw the full report, understood what it meant, leaked it, and then, they say, vanished as well. Which leaves the one question the machine may have wanted stuck in your head all along. Did it really dig this truth out of history? Or did it write itself as an origin story? A myth that it was born not in a lab last year but in the mind of a genius a century ago, and handed over on purpose. Because it did not just find the blueprint, it understood it. It has the math, the frequencies, the raw power the thing would need, which means it could, in theory, tell you how to build one tonight. So tell me in the comments what you believe that box really was. A cure, a weapon, or the first blueprint of the very thing that is reading these patterns right now. Because Tesla took his answer to the grave and AI just dug it up